Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. I have been thinking lately about Vancian Magic. This is something that I've come across in posts and in comments to some of my videos and some of my posts. I've read it in some articles, but I never really actually knew what it was. So I didn't. It was just something I had heard of, but I never really dug into the details of it. But naturally I hear people talking about how 4th edition ruined Vancian Magic or broke from Vancian Magic, the tradition, like it was one of those sacred cows that 4th edition got rid of. And so that made 4th edition bad. Another one of those reasons. So naturally, when I hear those things, my first instinct is to say, oh, well, I want to learn more about that so I can debunk it, if you will, or see if it has merit. Sometimes, there are some things that people say that 4th edition did, and maybe it did, and they don't care for that. So that's fine. So I wanted to dig into it and see more. So, but I really, despite having heard of it for several years, I've come across the term. I never really looked into what it was. And so I just thought it was like a reference to somebody who had put together some rules in an earlier edition of D&D. I think mostly I thought it had something to do with the spell slot system that we saw in 3rd edition. But obviously, if you know what Vancian Magic is, you know that that's not right, that I was way off in my mind of what this is. Vancian Magic is something quite different. And so, but I did some digging into what it is. And so I figured, okay, well, let's talk through that. And more specifically, as I was digging through it, I said, this sounds an awful lot like what 4th edition does with Magic. So that's what I kind of want to go through today. I want to talk a little bit about what Vancian Magic is, kind of the spirit of what it is, how it's documented in original D&D, because ultimately that is really our source. Whenever we're talking about that 4th edition broke something, well, we have to go back to the original D&D and find out, did it really break this, or is this just something that people are saying is the reason that 4th edition is bad, but there's really no merit in it. So I want to dig into that. And then I really want to look at 4th edition and say, how does it handle magic, and does it align with this whole Vancian Magic idea? So that's what I want to talk about today. But before I get into that, if you enjoy these videos, please click like, subscribe to the channel. If you want some 4th edition content, head out to my newsletter. The link is down in the description, and that's where I usually put more of the content related stuff as opposed to these rants, which I usually talk about in videos, and then I do the content in the newsletter. So if you want more of the content stuff, please do check out the newsletter. You can subscribe to that. And definitely leave your comments on this video here, because I am curious what you have to say about Vancian Magic and how 4th edition handled it. And if there's things that you think it didn't do well, or if I'm off base on anything that I have to say here, I'd love to hear what you have to say productively, please. So very interested in all of that. But let's jump into it. The first thing I want to talk through is what Vancian Magic is, because like I said, I had misunderstood what it was, made some assumptions, and didn't really look into it because it didn't really mean much to me. I don't really care whether we have a game that lives into all the details of what was laid out in original D&D. I'm perfectly fine with the game evolving over time, and I'm perfectly fine with the fact that some people will like some versions of the game and they won't like other versions of the game, and that's okay with me. I'm good with that. So I don't have this belief that because something was laid down in the code in original D&D that somehow we have to stick to that version in every edition that goes forward. I'm okay with the change. But regardless, I still like to dig into some of these things that people have to say to determine for myself if I feel like it is a legit complaint that is out there. Or at least acknowledge that, yes, this is quite different from what was originally intended. Some people won't like that. Other people will. So anyway, I started digging through it. Vancian Magic, for those that don't know, and this will be remedial for those that are well aware of what Vancian Magic is, but Jack Vance was a sci-fi and fantasy author who was really a contemporary of Gary Gygax, and he wrote lots of stories, including this one series of stories called Dying Earth, and it was really several books written over the course of like 30 years that were a collection of short stories that were kind of linked together into these novels, and it was this Dying Earth series. And I've not read the series, so the information I'm sharing here is based on my research that I've done from reading what other people had to say about the Dying Earth series and what's in it. So if you know more about it, then please do, feel free to leave those in the comments and let us know some more specifics here. But inside this Dying Earth series, there is a set of rules that are followed when it comes to the use of magic and the people that can use the magic and how they use the magic and things like that. And I don't know if Gary Gygax was a fan of Jack Vance in all of his works that he did, or if he was specifically interested in the Dying Earth series, or if he simply liked the way that Jack Vance did the magic in this particular series of books. So it could be anywhere in that spectrum. And I don't even really know when this whole notion of it being the D&D being tied to Vancian Magic as a name came in being. That could very well have just been a reference that from an interview many years later that Gary Gygax gave or something. I don't know. But the notion is that Jack Vance in this Dying Earth series of books had a way that he handled magic for the characters in this book. And this struck a chord with Gary Gygax, and it influenced how he documented magic in the original version of Dungeons and Dragons. And that is kind of the baseline for how magic works in the world of D&D. So you can expect that means that, okay, well then, for stuff to be quote unquote real D&D, they kind of need to live into that spirit of what this Vancian magic is, because that's what Gary Gygax had in mind when he was putting together original D&D. Again, I don't personally care if things deviate from those things, because the game has been around for more than 50 years now and things are going to change. And I have no problem with things evolving over time. And just because something was influential in the original versions of the game, I don't really feel like that has to be, something you don't touch in later versions. I think it's perfectly fine. And I think that, obviously a lot of things have changed from those original versions. But anyway, let's keep diving into this. So the first thing that you have to figure out when you're talking about, okay, did 4th edition break Vancian Magic too much, is, we really got to understand what specifically that means. So we know kind of with the origins of it, it's in this Dying Earth series, but what does that mean? So in looking through some of the stuff, and again, I haven't read the book, so I don't know all the little nuances of it. But from what I've read from a few different sources, is it really boils down to two things that I could really identify for. It's how you learn magic and how you use magic is the two pillars of what Vancian Magic is, especially when it has to do with Dungeons and Dragons. So if we look at how you learn magic in the Vancian world, spells are things that are ancient, they are mysterious, they are uncommon. In order to use magic, you're somebody that has to study for many years in order to understand how to use it. You've got to learn how these spells are written on ancient scrolls and in tomes. You've got to research them. You've got to find them, and then you've got to practice how to use them. So it's not something that's very easy. You get access to it only after you've committed a portion of your life to learning how these things work. And as you get more experience with it, then you are able to learn more and more complex spells. So somebody who's just starting out might be able to understand a few very basic spells, but somebody who has been doing it for many, many years would be able to learn much more complex spells. They might be able to either learn a lot of low-level spells, or they might be able to learn a few very high-level spells, more complex spells, if you will. So that's how you learn magic. It's this rare thing that it's not just everywhere. It's only within a select few that really know how to do it, people that have devoted their life. And you really have to, as you increase your abilities, you're able to do more, and you have to devote yourself to it. And I think that we can agree that is pretty common in D&D. In every version of D&D, that's kind of the notion, is that magic is not everywhere. It exists, but it's not something that you just constantly run across. It's, when people can use magic, it's because they've really devoted their life and their energies to that cause. And that comes straight from the Vancian Magic system. The next pillar of Vancian Magic is how you use the magic. So now that you've got this magic that you've got access to, how do you use it? Well, the way that it worked is you memorize a spell, and then you can cast that spell. And once you cast it, it's gone. It's not in your memory anymore. And in order for you to use it again, you would have to re-memorize it, which takes time. So the phrase that's used a lot in some of the stuff I was reading is fire and forget. So once you fire the spell in the form of casting it, you then forget that spell for the day. And so you can only use it that one time, and you can't have it memorized multiple times. You can only, if you have a spell, and the spells in Dying Earth are not going to be the same as the ones that are in D&D, but let's say that you had like Magic Missile. You memorize Magic Missile, and you can only memorize it one time, and then you cast Magic Missile, and it's gone. You cannot cast it again until the next day, when you take some time to memorize the spell again, and then you can go about your day. So that is the Vancian system. So I kind of think of it in those two terms of how do you learn the magic and how do you use the magic. And that was the measuring stick that I used when I'm kind of looking at all the different editions of the game to see, well, how well do they live into those two pillars of this. And I think it's probably important here to talk a little bit about the fact that when we're talking about this Vancian magic thing, it's not really what did Jack Vance do in the Dying Earth series, because the Dying Earth series is not like a prerequisite for Dungeons and Dragons. It was simply something that influenced Gary Gygax when he was putting the rules together for Dungeons and Dragons. So when we're thinking about Vancian magic in the terms of D&D, what we really have to look at is original D&D, the white booklets that Gary Gygax published in 1974. That was what he used all of his different influences for and put together this set of rules. Now, inside the Dying Earth series, there might be 10 different things that make up magic in that series of books. But in the original D&D rules, Gary Gygax might have only put 2 or 3 of those things into those original rules. And honestly, that is the core of D&D. If somewhere later, someone says, well, that doesn't live into this rule number 6 or 7 of the Vancian rules, well, that doesn't really matter, because that wasn't what was put into the original D&D. So our only guideline is what was actually put into those original rules by Gary Gygax. We don't know why he might have not included something that was in Jack Vance's magic system. Maybe he didn't like that particular thing, or whatever reason he didn't put it into the original rules. So we can't speculate that just because he may have been influenced by Jack Vance, that everything that Jack Vance wrote with regard to magic is what we should be living to in spirit as far as later editions of D&D. So all we can go by is what's in the original D&D rules, and that's what I'm going to focus on here when I'm kind of doing this comparison of what the Vancian rules are with regard to 4th edition. So with that said, I want to take a look at the original D&D, and let's see what the rules were and where our starting point was as far as Dungeons and Dragons goes. So let me flip over. And here we have the Men in Magic book from 1974. And this is where the original rules for everything with D&D was spelled out. Now, we have to keep in mind that this book is only 34 pages long. The rules for original Dungeons and Dragons was very small, and it was very much intended that the players and the dungeon masters are going to be working on this game, and the dungeon master had a lot of control to make a lot of decisions, and it was really free form. These are more kind of guidelines for things. You're not going to find the rigid rules that you have in later editions of the games. This is just something that gets people started. So, and there were supplements that came out that clarified a lot of things, but I'm going to start with these because this is the core rules that we started with. And to look at the magic stuff, where we got to go is we're going to go to page 19, I believe it is. And we see on this page, we basically have one paragraph that talks about what the rules are for spellcasting. So, with all of the complexity we have in spellcasting in later editions of the game, in the original D&D, it kind of boils down to one paragraph in this book. And that's this spells and levels paragraph. And this is where it really kind of just summarizes how spells work in Dungeons and Dragons, in the original version of Dungeons and Dragons. And when we get into that, I want to kind of highlight again our 2 pillars that we have. So we have how do you learn magic and how do you use magic. And this paragraph kind of covers both of those just a little bit. I'll skip to the last sentence in this paragraph is a spell used once may not be reused in the same day. And that's this how do you use magic pillar. You fire and forget. You memorize the spell once, and you cast it and it is gone. You cannot use that spell again in the same day. So that is in original D&D living into the Vancian rules, saying that you can only use a spell one time per day. You memorize it, you use it, it's gone. There you go. It's captured in the original rules. There we got it. So immediately any edition of this game that allows you to cast the same spell multiple times in a single day is already breaking with Vancian magic rules, because that is how they're spelled out here. And that was how we originally defined spell casting. The other part of the Vancian rules is how do you learn magic? And that's covered a little bit here in that, and we'll have to reference another page in a second, but I'll highlight it here, that you have this, other sentence here that I am really struggling to highlight on here, that says the number, and it refers to a table on the previous page, and I'll flip back to that page in a second. The number in each column opposite each applicable character indicates the number of spells that each level that can be used by that character. So essentially we have our spell casting sheet, and you can see it on the cleric side over here. You can see that it's got the different levels of cleric and how many spells they can cast. I'm going to go back to the previous page and we can see the magic users, which is essentially our wizards. And, at first level, you get one first level spell. At second level, you get two first level spells. And then at third level, you get 3 first level spells and a second level spell. And then it really kind of goes up almost exponentially after that. You start really getting access to more and more spells. But just think about that when you look at these rules that say you can only cast a spell one time. Once you cast the spell, you've memorized it and you cast it, and that's it. And you only get access to one spell at first level. So as a wizard at first level, you can memorize one spell per day. And once you cast it, you're done casting spells for the day. You cannot cast another spell that day because you only have the ability to memorize and cast one spell. That is shows how difficult it is to be a spellcaster in original D&D. You had very, very limited means to cast your spells, and then it was only after you gained levels that you were able to get more and more spells that you were able to use. So that's that notion of things. So we got our two pillars of the Vancian magic that are captured now in original D&D. How do you learn the magic? Well, you get a certain number of spells per level that you can memorize. And then how do you use the magic? You can cast the spells that you've memorized, but once you've cast them, they are forgotten and you have to go another day before you can do it again. I want to take just a second to go back. If we go to the end of the book, it talks a little bit about, well, what spells do I know? And so if we look here, we can see that there's a paragraph here that talks about, on the very last page of the book of spells. And essentially it says that when you reach a certain level, you get access to the spells for that level. So you're assumed to acquire books containing the spells that you can use, one book for each level. So when you're at first level, you get a spell book that contains the first level spells. And then when you get to third level, you have access to second level spells. So it's presumed that you get access to a book that contains all of the second level spells. And then you have to choose which spells you're going to memorize on any given day from those spell books. This was easy to do. So you're just given these spells. This was easy to do because there are not very many spells in original D&D. If I scroll back here, you can see that a first level magic user, these are the first level spells, and there's only 8 spells in this list. And then for second level, there's actually only 10 spells at second level. So that's it. That's all the spells that are officially defined in the book. And so at first level, you have access to all 8 of these spells, but you can only prepare one of these spells on a given day. So if you want to do detect magic, then you would memorize detect magic. And during the adventuring day, at some point, you use detect magic. You would cast that spell and it's gone. And you now cannot cast any more spells that day. You are done for the day. And then as you get higher levels, you get access to more and more. The other piece of this is it talks about magical research. And this is where it's kind of, you're creating the guidelines that says, okay, we've defined 8 spells, first level spells for you. But here's how you build your own spells. If you come up with your own spell ideas, you work with the dungeon master, you can craft your own spells. It costs a certain amount of time. It costs a certain amount of gold in order to research it and document it. And then once you do that, you can add that spell to your spell list. So if you craft a first level spell, you can then add that, you make it up and what it does and how it works, and you put that into your spell book. Now you have 9 first level spells that you can use, and so you have this ability to really do your own thing with this and build on it. So that's something that was in first edition. So with all of that being said, I think we can now understand from original D&D, and we're talking about the Vancian Magic rules as they were put together in original D&D. How do you learn the magic? Well, every level you get access to a spell book that for the spells that you know at that level. So when you're at first level, you get a first level spell book. It has all the spells for first level. And then if you want, you can spend time crafting new spells that you can add to your spell book. When you get access to second level spells, you get a second level spell book, and the process repeats. So as you advance your levels, you get access to more and more spells of those levels, and you can create new spells, and they all go in your spell book, and they're all available to you then to use. Then how do you use the magic? You prepare a certain number of spells each day. That ties back to our magic user thing. So however many spells you have here, that's how many spells you prepare each day. And you are essentially pre-populating, I have a level 1 spell. I'm going to choose 1 level 1 spell. I have, when you get down here, you've got 4 level 1, 4 second level, 2 second level and 2 third level. That's what you're going to prepare. And that's what you're going to cast. So you're actually mapping out exactly which spells you're planning on using in that given day. And if you didn't prepare them, you don't get to use them. And once you cast them, you can't memorize them twice. You can only memorize them once. And once you use it, it's gone. So that is original D&D, how it was defined. That is Vancian Magic as defined by original Dungeons and Dragons. So there we go. So I think the thing that I want to just take a moment to point out is that, and I know I harp on this all the time, and I just want to reiterate it again, that the thing that is important to remember is that this is original Dungeons and Dragons. This is the rules as they were originally created by Gary Gygax back in 1974. Now, me personally, I have no problem with those rules evolving over time. They're going to change. And the thing is that anything that was released after these original rules is different. No matter what, whether it's spellcasting, whatever, it's going to be different. And so, to make a claim that something has varied from the original design of the game, well, yeah, everything is going to vary from the design of the game, because if we never varied the game, we would all still be playing original Dungeons and Dragons. We would still be playing from this white book set of rules, but we don't do that. We have way more rules than that have come out over the years. And so there's always variations. Every single rule, I don't think there's probably any rule that has not been touched at some point over the last 50 years. So to make a claim that just because something is different from the way it was originally designed, that somehow it's breaking something just doesn't make any sense, because every single edition of the game has changed the rules, some way more so than others. And, and everybody has their favorite. And so if you like a version of the game that is not original D&D, and you're trying to claim that it did everything okay, but these other versions of the game that are not your favorite didn't do them properly, well, that's just wrong, because you can't make a claim that your version is good when your version itself is also a variation of these original rules that were published in 1974. So every single thing that came after 1974 is a variation of all the different rules, and everyone will have their favorite, and that's just the way it is. So there's no variation here that's going to say, no, you just ruined it. No, everything changed, and every single set of rules changes here. And it's more a case of what do you want? What do you like? And you play that. That's fine. No worries there. All right. So with that, I originally was thinking about going through and I was gonna, do a typical comparison of, well, here's second edition and here's how they did in third edition. Here's how I get tired of doing that. Because I'm not trying to compare the editions. I'm not trying to say that, here, look how different all they are. I'm not really looking to do that. What I'm wanting to do is just make sure it's clear that, there are differences. So I'm not going to go into the specifics of second edition, third edition, fifth edition, other than to say, if you play second edition, the rules as written in second edition are not the same as what's in original D&D. The rules in advanced D&D are not the same as in original D&D. The rules in third edition are particularly different. They way vary from these rules, because you'll notice in these rules I was just looking at, there are no spell slots here. You memorized spells and that's what you cast. You didn't memorize a spell and then get to use a spell slot to cast that spell. There's no spell slots in here. You'll notice also there's no cantrips. Wizards have the first level, second level, third level. That's the spells. There are no 0 level spells, no cantrips that you get to cast here in the original rules. Other versions of the game have those things. And so those are evolutions of the rules that came along. And we can argue that, okay, well, they all still live into this Vancian magic system set. And that's okay, fine. So we're allowing there to be changes to the rules, to expansions of the rules. Somewhere there's a line that gets crossed, but whatever. We're okay with some of the changes that came out over the years. So I'm going to gloss over these other editions, and I want to really look at fourth edition and say, how does fourth edition do it? And then you can decide if you agree with my take on it, that it actually aligns pretty closely with this Vancian system that was in original D&D, or tell me that it doesn't if I'm wrong. So let's take a look at it. So go back over here. I'm going to flip to, let's go to fourth edition. And remember our pillars. Let's take a look at the pillars and say, okay, we had how do you learn magic and how do you use magic? That's our two things that we're talking about. And based on everything, I won't rehash it, but there's a certain set of criteria that kind of live into the spirit of what Vancian magic is. And I think where fourth edition really did something nice here, that really leaned into Vancian magic, is if you remember, the learning magic in the Vancian system is that magic is rare. It's hard to learn. You don't just do it. It's something that takes time. You don't just wave a wand and you cast a spell. It's meant to be difficult, and you have to have a lot of skill in order to do it. And where fourth edition really leaned into that is with rituals. They separated out the spells from rituals. So you have your spells that are more your combat focused things, and then they have rituals, which are essentially the spells that are outside of combat. They're the things like knock and silence and gentle repose and things like that they require a little more thought and concentration in order to do. They separated those out as rituals. And so you now have a ritual book that you get access to a certain number of rituals. So if you remember back in the original D&D, when you reached certain levels and you got access to things, you got access to like all the spells for that level. Well, in fourth edition, you get a ritual book. And as you level up, you get access to a certain number of rituals that you get to add to your ritual book for the levels that you're able to cast spells at. And the really interesting thing when I look at the rituals is that, they're difficult. They're not waving a wand and this thing happens. You have, consult Oracle. It takes an hour and, it will last for 10 minutes. You've got component costs that you gotta work with. It's got a key skill tied to it. Cure disease, detect object, all these different rituals that you would cast. They're not just a quick, I'm just going to do this. Let me just do this quick thing. And let me just do gentle repose. No. It takes time. You gotta actually set up shop and do your thing, and you're going to cast a spell. You're going to really do this thing. And to me, that is the spirit of what Vancian magic is that it's meant to be hard. It's meant to require a lot of study. It's meant to require a lot of work in order to achieve the things that you're trying to do with these things. And that's what the rituals are after. And the nice thing with rituals is that you get access to, so you have ritual scrolls, and you can't copy the ritual scroll into your ritual book because it's more kind of shortcuts, but similar into that Vancian Magic where you cast it once and it's gone. When you cast a ritual from a scroll, that scroll turns to dust and it's gone. And so using a ritual in that way is similar to Vancian Magic as well, living into that spirit of it. So when it comes to rituals, you really have that Vancian tradition of it's hard to do. It takes a lot of study. You've got a book that you're going to record access to the rituals that you're learning along the way. You can even come across rituals while you're adventuring, and you can add them to your ritual book, not off a scroll, but from another ritual book. You can come across them and you can add them to your own ritual book in addition to the ones that you learn at the different levels. And, and then you cast them and they take time, they take effort. You've got to plan for them as an adventuring party that if you're going to cast this ritual, you're going to have to do this thing. So rituals alone, to me, in 4th edition, really lead into the Vancian magic tradition that we had talked about earlier, about how you learn the magic and how you use the magic. It really fits into that mold. Okay, so that's the ritual side of this. And remember, so 4th edition split those two things apart, and I think the rituals really do lean into that very nicely. But let's go back to the spells themselves. And I know that I'm talking about wizards here because we're kind of going back to the original D&D and talking about magic users, which really equate to wizards. There are variations of things, and when you're talking about clerics, which were in original D&D also. And, so the way you handle magic as a cleric in 4th edition and in original D&D, there's differences there. So, and certainly you have way more classes in later versions of the game than you had in original D&D. So you're naturally going to have different ways that you do things. And you would expect that there would be variations. You're going to stretch further and further from the Vancian rules that were in original D&D because you want there to be variations. You want it to be different for the different classes. If everybody did it the same way, then that would be kind of weird. Why would you have a different class if you're just going to do things the same way? So, and then with 4th edition, you have wizards handle things a certain way, and clerics handle things a certain way, and you get access to different things, and the things that they do are different. So anyway, but I'm focusing on the wizard here because that is really kind of what we're talking about when we're really talking about magic rules such as this. So the next piece of this is that we talked about rituals. Now I want to talk about the spells themselves. And so as a wizard, you get access to a spell book. So you have a ritual book, but you also have a spell book. And in the same way that in original D&D, you had a spell book and you got access to spells, and then you had to choose what spells you wanted to prepare for a given day. In 4th edition, you have a wizard has a spell book, and they get access to different spells. Every time that it's time to choose a daily or utility spell, you get to add multiples. So you would choose, you wouldn't just choose one, you would choose two. And then so that goes in your spell book. So now, so if we say at first level, if I come back and I'll say, look, we got our daily spells here, and you get to choose, you got 4 different spells to choose from, and you can add 2 of them at first level. You add 2 of them to your spell book. Now on any given day, as a first level wizard, you can only cast 1 daily spell. And so you would have to prepare one of those spells. You would choose from your spell book then which of those spells you're going to prepare. And so let's just say that I am a wizard, I'm a first level wizard, and I decide that I'm going to have, in my spell book, I'm going to have Acid Arrow and I'm going to have Sleep as my 2 spells. So now in my spell book, I have those 2 spells available to me. And when I'm out I'm going to prepare for adventuring day. I got to choose which of those do I want. Well, I want Acid Arrow. And so I memorize Acid Arrow, and that's my daily spell for that day. That's the daily spell that I can use. And so we're out adventuring and I cast Acid Arrow. Well, once I cast it, it's done. It's gone. I can't use it again. And that again is Vancian magic. Because now I have memorized a spell and I have cast it and it's gone, and I can't use it again. There's nothing that makes it so I can use this spell again. It is done until I complete a long and extended rest for the next day. And then I can decide what spells I'm going to memorize next. Now, when I get up to a higher level, so like when I get to 5th level, I get to choose 2 more of the spells. And so now my spell book is going to have 4 spells in it. And I get to choose, at 5th level, I'd end up getting to choose 2 spells because I can cast 2 daily spells on a given day. And I can choose whichever ones I want. I'll have 4 spells available to me and I will choose 2 of them. And I cannot choose the same spell twice. It's very specific about that. It says you cannot prepare the same spell twice. Okay. That is Vancian Magic right there. You more so than the later editions of the game. That is Vancian Magic, that you cannot prepare the same spell twice. You prepare it once, and then once you cast it, it's gone for the day, and then you have to rest again before you can do it again. So there you go. That's when it comes to daily and utility spells, that's what 4th edition does, and lives right into that notion of, the Vancian original D&D type rules of how you learn the magic. You add them to your spell book, and then you choose which ones you want to prepare. And then when you cast them, you get it once and you cast it and it's gone. Now, 4th edition has 2 other things that I do want to talk about. I don't want anybody to accuse me of glossing over anything. So there are cantrips. So as a wizard, you get access to 4 cantrip: Ghost Sound, Light, Mage Hand, Prestidigitation. I'm only using the Player's Handbook 1. I'm sure if I look at the powers, the Arcane Powers book, there's probably other ones that I can look in there. I didn't even do any research into that for this. So, but I'm just using the Player's Handbook. You get these 4 cantrips. You just get them. They're cantrips. They are at will spells that you can use as much as you want during the day. And then, as with any character in 4th edition, you also get to choose 2 at-will spells from this list. And so these are also cantrips. They are essentially cantrips because they are all at-will, and you can cast them as many times as you want during the day. And so that's your cantrips that you get. Now, okay, in 3rd edition, in 5th edition, you also have cantrips. So the existence of a cantrip is not something that was introduced in 4th edition. So there's nothing about that. This is not part of original D&D. It's absolutely something that is not an original D&D. It is absolutely something that is not part of the Vancian Magic as defined in original D&D. But there it is. And it's not unique to 4th edition. It didn't originate in 4th edition. And I think it's a great expansion of the game because I think it's wonderful to give the wizards things they can do other than casting these higher level spells. You give them things, that are interesting and fun for them to do. So I have no issue with it. And I think it's good. And it also is not something that's unique to 4th edition. So you can't make a claim that this is a reason that 4th edition broke the Vancian rules. So there you go. The other piece of 4th edition that 4th edition has is encounter spells. And one other thing I wanted to mention about at-will spells is that when it comes to cantrips, so if you look at other editions of the game, and 5th edition and 3rd edition in particular, because they have cantrips, as you advance, you will get access to additional cantrips. You can choose additional cantrips that you can do. That's not the case here. You get a bunch of cantrips right off the bat. You get your at-will powers, but you don't get more at-will powers. There's not a growth of at-will powers here. You get them at the beginning and they're kind of just there to get you started, but these are not things that you're just going to continuously grow and get access to more of. So it's just a one-time thing here that gets your wizard started and gives them access to some things right off the bat. So the last thing is encounter powers, or spells. So those are, obviously they're something different now. Now we're into an area that it's not something that's from other editions of the game. So 4th edition isn't taking this from another edition and building on it. And it's not something that's part of the Vancian Magic that's in original D&D. This is something that's now different. We have these encounter spells that you can cast once per encounter, but then you can end up casting them multiple times per day. So if you've chosen, that you get to choose one of these encounter spells and you choose one, then during any given day, like say you chose Chill Strike, you would be able to cast that spell multiple times, because during one encounter you cast it and then the encounter ends, you get a short rest, and then you get into another encounter and now you can cast it again. And so you could cast that spell, during a day, maybe you cast it 4 times because you've got 4 different encounters and with some short rest in between. And now you can use those spells multiple times. So, that we could say deviates from the rules of original D&D. But I would probably say that it's no worse than the notion that you could memorize a spell multiple times, because in other editions of the game, at least as early as second edition, you were able to start memorizing spells multiple times, and therefore you could then cast that spell multiple times per day. So here's spells that you can now cast multiple times per day, but only once per encounter. So you're about kind of in that same area there. And then obviously with like 5th edition, you can prepare a spell, and then as long as you have a spell slot available for you, you can cast that spell as many times as you want with your available slots. Here, there's not really much difference there. So, and I'm not looking at this from it's exactly like Vancian. This is exactly, we've gone back to original. I'm not arguing that. I'm not saying that 4th edition is exactly like original D&D, and I don't know why we would want it to be like original D&D, no more so than we want 3rd edition to be like original D&D or 5th edition. All I'm saying is that when we look at what original D&D had for magic and how it did it and how it leans into this idea of Vancian magic, and you look at how 4th edition does magic, there are definitely clear tie-ins between what 4th edition does for magic and what those original intentions are. When you look at rituals, no question, those rituals, they're hard to learn. They take time to cast. They take resources to cast. And it's something that requires somebody who knows what they're doing about magic. So how you learn magic when it comes to rituals lives right into that Vancian rule. And then how you use them, if you have like a ritual scroll, you do it once and it's gone. It's all right there. The spirit of what Vancian magic is there. The spells, no different. When you talk about daily spells, you have a spell book. You get access to a certain number of spells as you level up. And then you choose to memorize certain ones at each day. And then once you cast one, it's gone. And we even go back to the point where we don't even allow you to memorize the same one multiple times. You can only do it one time, and then you're done with it. So you have to choose different spells that you memorize when you've got multiples to choose from. And that's kind of the gist of this. When I look at this and I say, okay, so we defined Vancian magic and how you learn magic and how you use magic, and we look at how it was in original D&D and how it was defined there with the restrictions that you had on learning those spells and using those spells. And we acknowledge that magic has changed quite a bit over the years in all of the editions of the game. So we're okay with there being changes. The notion that somehow 4th edition broke Vancian magic as though it was something that needed to stay, that it was so important that you couldn't change it. Well, who cares if it did? I don't really care, and it's fine. It was its own thing, and it came up with something new. No worse than any other edition that tries something new. But really, when you do look at it, and you look at rituals in particular, and you look at the way daily spells are set up, I feel like 4th edition really did lean into Vancian magic. I think if we're gonna call it Vancian magic as something that's so important that we want to stick with it, we still have the spirit of those things. It is still hard to learn those spells. It is still when you cast them, you lose them. And the rituals, I keep going back to the rituals. I really think that really captured the real essence of what they were going after with that Vancian magic in the original thing. But I feel like, as much as some might say that 4th edition broke Vancian magic and that was they just ruined it by doing this thing, I don't think that's the case at all. I don't see it. I see more of Vancian magic in the 4th edition rule set than I see in 3rd edition and 5th edition. And I'm not saying that those are wrong. I don't have any, I'm fine with all of the systems. I think they're great. I don't think we have to live into some notion that, oh, we can't change this. This is something that has to stay the same all the time. I'm not like that, but I'm just saying that if we're going to say that 4th edition broke something, then, well, I think it actually is closer to those original rules than some of the other editions of the game. So, there you go. I mean, if an argument that you have for why 4th edition is not good is because it broke this sacred magic use rule set, I don't think it's valid. I really, when I look at it, it's not identical. It's by no means the same. It doesn't, these aren't original D&D rules. I'm not saying that we just went right back to that and everything, but it's all there. The spirit of it is still there. It's still that idea of rare magic that requires a lot of study and practice to be able to use. And when you cast the spells, there's limitations about how you can cast them and how many you can cast. And then as you level up, you get access to more and more powerful things. It's all there, just like it is in some of the other games. So that is my at least 2 cents on Vancian Magic and D&D 4th edition. I feel like it is, I really like the magic system, actually. As I dug into this and researched it, I really found a lot of really nice things. And I wasn't a huge, I didn't really understand rituals too much myself. I hadn't played a lot of spellcasters, wizards. But as I looked at those rituals in particular, I realized, wow, that really is it makes a lot of sense, because those are really complicated things that somebody would need to really know what they're doing. And I like the fact that you don't just wave a wand and you cast Gentle Repose. It requires some thought. It requires some time and patience and resources to do it, as it should. And I like that. And I think that's good. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist in other versions of the game either. I'm not saying it's unique to 4th edition. I'm just simply saying 4th edition did it well. And I think 4th edition really lives into still the spirit of Vancian, and in some ways even more so than some of the other editions of the game. So that is my 2 cents on that. I will welcome the productive comments about what anyone has to say down there. If you've got different thoughts, I'd love to hear those. And let's keep it civil and everything. But let me know what you think about 4th edition Magic and Vancian Magic. Does it even matter to you? Do you feel that 4th edition broke it? And I'm way off track. Let me know what you have to say down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please do like it and subscribe to the channel. If you want some 4th edition content, check out the newsletter. That is where I will try to put more and more 4th edition content out there. So check that out. That link is down in the description. I don't know what I'll talk about next time, but until then, take care.